We have to apologize, a bit of technical difficulty there, but we're not going to stop that, let that stop us from getting into the discussion. Our guest in the studio, Apia Akusi Adomako, is West Africa Regional Director for Cuts International. He's here with William Kofi Demitia, who is a tax consultant with Ali Nachia and Associates. Right, well, let's get into it. And I said we would start with tax, you know. We've touched a little bit on it earlier, but it appears to be such a massive opportunity that we're letting slide past us, isn't it, Apia?
Yes, we are not doing well when it comes to collecting of taxes. And anytime government is looking to raise money, government will go to those who are still paying taxes and then try to squeeze a little
more.
Yes. And if you look at the figures, our tax to GDP ratio, the rebase figure is around 12%. And on the average for Africa is 21%. And when you look at the OECD's average is 34.5%. So even let's use our African average, which is 21%. And if you do the computation of our GDP, which is 65 billion from the last, this projection, and compare the loss in expected tax revenue, is looking around 20 billion cedis per annum.
Wow.
It means that we are not going for 20 billion Ghana cedis of tax revenue. And this is far more than what Sino Hydro is giving to us, that we are having a fanfare on it. It's more than what IMF gave to us in 2014. And so this morning, I submit to Honorable Finance Minister and Mr. Kofi that they know where the money is in this country. The money is here. It's not in London. It's not in Singapore. They have to go for the money. They have to invest. They have to invest in Ghana Revenue Authority so that they can bring the money. In fact, before last week, we did a work at the office, and we're looking at the informal sector, the housing building industry. About 95% of houses in this country are built by people in the informal sector, the mason, the plumbers, the electricians. And when we pay them, they don't pay taxes to the state. So at the end of the month, they earn more than you and I who work at the high street. And these people also enjoy social services for free. And the government has not decided to tax them because the government finds it to be difficult in taxing them. So anytime government wants money, government will come to you and I, and the government will force us to pay more. And so what is preventing government in ensuring that every Ghanaian who is working pay his or her taxes so that we can develop the country? Until we find ways to generate enough revenue, Ghana Beyond Aid will be a mirage, and in 2024 we may have to still go back to our aid again.
Imagine that. That's a horrifying prediction. Let's pray that we have the brains to avoid it. Right now, you know, we've talked about the untaxed, and you know, a great example, those who are working in the construction sector. But it's not just them. You know, those who run hairdressing salons, barber shops, even those who have stalls in markets, and these people are at specific locations. You would think that somebody by now would have come up with some kind of solution, maybe using technology or whatever, to identify, tag, and track these people, just so that we can, you know, tax them. What do you reckon? Is it that have we given up? Have we given up on widening the tax net?
Well, I think the answer you always get is it's difficult to go after them. They don't bring in the revenue that we expect. If somebody is bringing us a million Ghana cedis, we see it as worthwhile than getting, say, 1,000 people to contribute a little amount towards it. So we look at it in terms of the ballpark figure as opposed to little drops of it make up that amount. And as you said about the informal sector and some of these artisans as we know them, I've always said that the approach of sitting in the tax office and expecting people to walk up and pay their taxes would not really work for us. Yes, by law, employers are supposed to withhold taxes and pay over for their employees. If you pay for goods, works, and services, by law, if it exceeds 2,000 Ghana cedis, you are required to do a withholding and pay over.
Yeah.
But for these artisans, you need to be able to design tailor-made solutions for them. In this age of mobile money, where everybody calls you and says, oh, can you send me Momo? Can you sell me Tigo Cash? Can you send me Vodafone Cash?
Yeah.
We have still, as a people, not leveraged on that to use it as a means to pay taxes. If you tell the person who is selling or who is the hairdressing salon person that close shop, walk to a GRA office and go and pay your tax, the person will not do that. If I'm selling tubers of yam in the market and you tell me I should close shop and go to the GRA, I won't do it. Because maybe in my time away, I will get a customer that would purchase my wares or patronize my goods that I am selling. So how do you do that? You make it convenient for them to pay the tax. It's one of the canons of taxation, convenience.
Yeah.
So how do we do that? Momo can be a good example. I've always said that GRA has zoned Ghana. You have district offices. We have large taxpayer office, we have medium taxpayer office, we have small taxpayer office. These small taxpayer offices are found in very convenient locations. All you need to do is to get to the small taxpayer office to identify these artisans within their catchment area. You can give them unique numbers. Probably if I'm in Adabraka, you can have AD101, and you know that represents Kofi Usudemitia. So if I king AD101, I know it is William.
Yeah.
So if I'm paying tax and it's by quarterly payment, the law is already there. It's about implementation.
Yeah.
So if I send it by Momo, I just add my reference number and I get an e-receipt to show that, oh, William has paid 60 Ghana cedis as his quarterly payment for, say, the first quarter of the year.
Yeah.
That is what we need to be able to do. Make it convenient for them to be able to comply with their tax obligations. I know that the policymakers are listening. I know the implementers of the tax laws are listening, and we expect that we'll leverage on technology to enable us. But there was a day I went into the tax office to pay my tax. I pay tax on quarterly basis. I spent close to about an hour in the tax office, and I asked myself, had it not been the fact that I'm a professional who believes I have a responsibility to do this, would I really waste 1 hour in a tax office just to comply with my tax obligations?
Yeah.
And these are the challenges that you not get most of the people in the informal sector to understand. So we need to do more. Yes, we appreciate the efforts Ghana Revenue Authority is doing, but we would always ask them to do more and ensure that some of these people can get to comply with their tax obligations, which affect their trade in a minimal way.
All right. Now, the tin is a sort of a first step in this crusade to identify economic, the economic population. And what the government has done so far is that in order for you to access certain services, you need a tin. So you go to hospital in order to access NHI and so forth. You need a tin. To open a bank account, you need a tin. To change money, you were supposed to show some tin ID. But the implementation of it, even where they are doing it, how effective is it? If I come and show you my tin, and as a result, you open a bank account for me, does that, seeing my tin, does that mean I paid tax? I may have a tin, but I may owe millions in tax. So is the tin really the solution here? Is it actually going to help government to track and monitor payment of tax?
Well, I would say that the tin is necessary but not sufficient. In some countries, people go by their social security number.
Yeah.
And so by entering your social security number, every economic activity, including your spending, would all pop up. But here, nobody is harnessing the tin data to see that I am paying annually 2,000 cedis as taxes, but my tin shows that I am earning more than, let's say, 200,000 Ghana cedis running through all my economic activities. Because if we are harnessing the tin data, your Momo transfer and receipt should will be collected alongside of your bank statement and your payroll tin. But there's no AI going on in this. And that is where we are falling short on it. Maybe government is slowing down because they want to ensure that we get a lot of Ghanaians there before they start. I don't know. I don't speak
How
for
are
them.
we getting them there? How
Yes.
are we going to get them? We don't even know where they are.
Yes. So the TIN number is, is very helpful. And I think that recently the Supreme Court ruled that you depriving
to file a case in court.
Yes, and so we also need to have a rethink about it. And can we even give TIN numbers to people at birth, or when you are going to school and you are being registered as part of your TIN, you get the TIN right from your WASI level, so that you can graduate with it, so that people don't have to go to Senate GRA office to get it.
Yeah.
Yes, so that is one step forward of the TIN number.
Okay. Ghana Post GPS, National Identification Authority, these were all supposed to be working towards achieving the same goal of identifying the population. How well do you think they've done?
Well, just to piggyback on the TIN before we move, I think that the approach to implementation of the TIN is problematic. Why? We expect people to walk up and voluntarily get it.
Yeah.
Why can't we get data that is already in existence and generate one for people? So, for example, if you go to the database of Driver and Vehicle Licensing Authority, you have people who have driver's licenses. If you go to Social Security and National Insurance Trust, SNIT, they have biometrically verified people who are in their system.
Yeah.
Why can't we, as he said, employ a system of matching the data? What do we have in our taxpayer identification number system, numbering system, and those say in SNIT? If we do a verification of the data, do we have people paying Social Security who do not have taxpayer identification numbers? Can we generate a TIN for them based on the information, the biometric data in SNIT system, if we accept that it's well foolproof, and send them the taxpayer identification numbers? If we do not take such steps, it will be difficult for us to be able to get a whole lot of people onto the system, because the voluntary bit doesn't work. What I recommended was that GRA should have partnered with the National Identification Authority, so that wherever they go rolling out the Ghana card, the data that they give to National Identification Authority is the same data you need for taxpayer identification number. So why can't we do that partnership, so that instantly you're able to feed off the data NIA gets and you generate the TIN for them? When they come for their card, they have their TIN as well. So we can do that. There are a lot of ways.
Why would GRA even have to go with them? If the National Identification Authority is the recognized, authorized body and is collecting that information anyway, isn't it simply a matter of sharing that data with GRA?
Precisely. And I think that there are several ways in which we can get a lot of people to have the taxpayer identification number. What I know is that generally, as we move towards, the national identification number will be the sole one that we'll use. But until we get to that perfect system, we can share information between government and government, we say government institutions. And these are some of the things I think that we can do to help develop the TIN. Now, on the issue of trying to identify people, as I said, it's a difficult task, but we have steps that we are taking. When we integrate them, and the institutions not work in silos, because I've seen that a lot in Ghana. Electoral Commission picks its data for elections. National Identification Number Authority picks its data for national identification. You have Driver and Vehicle Licensing Authority picking their data for driver's license. You have SNIT picking its data. You have Passport Office picking its data. We need to get to the point where we share information between government institutions so that we can have data that is credible and identify people. So these are my thoughts. We need to let them work, let the institutions work, and it's all a matter of technology. Yeah, it's really a matter of technology.
By the way, some education for our audience. According to the data protection law, there is only one institution in Ghana that has the mandate, the legal mandate, to collect and store biometric data of citizens of Ghana. That institution is the National Identification Authority, no other. So SNIT doesn't have the legal right to collect and store biometric data. Neither does the Electoral Commission. Any of the organizations in this nation that are collecting and storing biometric data, if you are not the NIA, the law doesn't allow you to collect it, but they all are. Even churches are collecting biometric data these days. It's ridiculous. All right, so let's look to 2020. So we are already picking up some some signals that the tax structure is going to be, or that there's going to be a restructure of our tax system. I mean, let's do some crystal ball gazing. What do you think it should look like? What should change?
Okay, let me start. When you look at the tax structures, you want to look at what percentage of your taxes do you want to come from personal income taxes? What percentage of taxes do you want to come from corporate sector, from social security, goods and service? And in Ghana, you realize that we get less from about 13% from personal income tax, whereas the African average is around 25 or so, and in most countries about 35% or so. And taxes on goods, indirect taxes is so high in Ghana that because it's easy for government to slap consumption taxes on fuel and communication service tax, that is where government is getting money. And so this year we want to see that government will improve upon personal income taxes and also personal taxes on properties, individual level taxes, taxation. That one is more progressive because the higher you earn, the more you earn, the more you pay. But when you look at the consumption taxes, the rich and the poor pay the same effective percentage rate. So we want to see that the taxes are kind of reoriented in a way that, and how can we do this? For the individual income tax, the tax on the individual, the first one is the PAYE, that's the pay as you earn, and which we are still doing well, but lots of people are still not paying taxes on that. And then you also come to property rates. We are not doing well. I mean, a study that we did said Accra alone, over $5 billion cedis annually can be collected from what?
That we are not collecting. In property rates alone in Accra.
Yes. And do you know what this money can do for Accra? We can solve our sanitation problem. We can solve our flooding problem. And the floods that we have in Accra will be a thing of the past.
It's about a third of Sino Hydro. But thank you so much for that. Let's very quickly cross over to Parliament, where Mama V. Uso-Abuaje is standing by with former Finance Minister Seth Terkper and Dr. Smart Sapong, Senior Research Fellow at the Institute of Research, Innovation and Development, IRID, from Kumasi Technical University.
Well, first, US, I would say that for the IMF, I know what is being said, but I believe that is the press statement after the visit, which they normally do. We should be patient. They did state in that come out after they have gone to the board, because this was a post-program review. And so, yes, overall, some that they express on that and other front. So
right, we apologize. We need to fix a problem with the sound so that we can go back to Parliament for live conversations. In the meantime, though, let's come back to our conversation here. And Apia, you were making some important points.
Yes. So on the tax structure, as I indicated, our tax structure is out of harmony with best practice when you look at international level. Currently, our personal income tax level is 13% of the total collection that we make. If you look at Africa, it's 16%, and the OECD is 26%. And so why is it that we are not taxing individual taxes? One of them is corporate taxes. Sorry, one of them is property rates.
Yes. And
also inheritance taxes. We are not going for this money, and I say that Honorable Oforiatta and Mr. Kofi knows where the money is, and they have to go and get the money for us. Is it because we are scared, or because that incident will fall on the big men, and so we don't want to go there, and rather we want to look at consumption taxes? I think our consumption taxes is too much in Ghana, and that one is very, very regressive, because the rich and the poor pay the same effective rate. And no country has developed with this kind of amorphous tax structure. And if you want to look beyond Ghana, beyond aid, I think that starting from today, we expect Honorable Furiata to come and tell Ghanaians that we are restructuring the tax structure to ensure that the more you earn, the more you pay, and that the poor will get relief from paying so much consumption taxes as it stands now.
It seems preposterous, doesn't it, William, to think that we would have a structure like this, where so few of income earners are actually, contributing to the broader net. So I mean, let's interrogate this. I made a comment earlier that when election times come around, I'll give you an example. There's a village called Navarui in the upper west region. Thanks to the Ghana Grant, we passed through it. I don't think the village has more than 100 inhabitants. But when the Bagre Dam is flooded, it blocks the road at Navarui. So those trying to cross from Upper West to Upper East can't do so, or vice versa. So we stopped in Navarui and interacted with the people there. And they said that the only other time when they get visitors who stop and spend time with them is during elections. Every election, politicians find the town of Navarui on the map and go there asking for votes. But when the road was flooded and we needed NADMU to come out there and help them, they couldn't find it on the map. So it appears that if it is a vote that the leader needs, they can identify all Ghanaians. But when it is time to collect revenue, provide services, suddenly Ghanaians are hard to find. What's the disconnect here?
I can only speculate, but my thinking is that it appears our institutions are not being empowered enough to do what they have to do. If institutions function and they function under their proper mandate, they can do the job without any, form of fear of victimization. I think the gradual politicization of our institutions has made it such that whenever you decide to take the right step, it is seen as a political tool for which your opponents would tell you when we are in government we won't do that, and for which you are afraid that you will lose votes by that. Property taxes, as we said, Ghana has property rates. We don't have property taxes in Ghana. And I say that without fear of contradiction, because if you're looking at property taxes, then you need a proper valuation of the properties.
Yeah.
And so you need a benchmark period. So this is the value. Over a period of time, this has been an appreciation of the value. And you are taxing that value appreciation. That is how property taxes are designed. What we have in Ghana is property. So we have a flat amount, pay 500 Ghana cedis every year. And you have buildings that could cost $1 million. And the property rates they pay on it is 500 Ghana cedis or 1,000 Ghana cedis a year. And these are, again, to me, they are low-hanging fruits. Like we like to go after, low-hanging fruits. But sometimes you think, who are the owners of these properties? Are they the high and mighty in society? We step on certain toes. And so we want to, as it were, go slow on that. Even if we increase the property rates without really having a property tax proper system, we can even rake in more revenue, even for the local assemblies, so that they can use it to solve most of the problem. Because one of the major things we face, as he mentioned, is sanitation and the issue of flooding in Accra. If we are able to even up the property rates, we can get a lot from that. So these are things that we need to do. Empower our institutions, give them the mandate, the full force to go out and do their work without fear that someone high up the chain will call them and tell them, hey, don't go down this path, don't do that, don't do that. If we can insulate them from the political interference, I believe that the institutions will do their best, because they are professionals like you and I. They have the same level of knowledge, they've had the same level of expertise and exposure. And so why is it that the institutions are not functioning? It calls for a deeper appreciation of the problem, and then we have to look at that.
All right, well, tax is giving me a headache now. Let's talk about something else. Let's talk about the banking sector. Bigger headache. First, let's hear what the finance minister had to say about it last year.
Mr. Speaker, not only are we growing the economy, the Bank of Ghana has also done an excellent job in implementing monetary policy. This has resulted in inflation dropping to single digits, lower interest rates, and a relatively stable currency, despite recent turbulence in emerging markets and a strengthening US dollar. The financial system is critical to the functioning and development of the economy, and banks are central to our financial system. In addition to providing employment to a large segment of the population, the role of banks as a provider of credit and liquidity to the economy remains critical to the functioning of the economy. Mr. Speaker, weak macroeconomic conditions coupled with poor corporate governance and risk management in a number of banks over the past few years led to high levels of non-performing loans and abuse of depositors' funds through related parties and affiliates in breach of regulatory requirements. In addition, the lack of enforcement of the rules contributed to liquidity and insolvency challenges in the banking sector. As a result, we inherited a number of weak banks and specialized deposit-taking institutions, savings and loans companies, finance houses, rural and community banks, and microfinance institutions. This eventually led to an assumption and consolidation of 7 banks with potentially adverse consequences for depositors, creditors, employers, suppliers, and other stakeholders. It was critically important that these banks be made to exit the financial system in a timely and orderly fashion to avoid contagion for the rest of the financial system. Mr. Speaker, since the assumption of office by the current administration of the Bank of Ghana, bold measures have been taken to restore the health and resilience of the banking sector and to clamp down on unlicensed deposit-taking financial houses. In addition to the 2 insolvent banks that were closed last year by the Bank of Ghana, 5 more closed in August this year for insolvency and other infractions of the law. Rescuing the situation regarding these 7 banks has so far cost some 9.9 billion Ghana cedis in monies government had not budgeted for and could surely have put in good use to fix our numerous infrastructure needs, roads, bridges, housing, etc. The government has continued to provide assurances to depositors and customers of licensed banks and specialized deposit-taking institutions through demonstrable actions that their deposits are safe. Indeed, following the creation of the Consolidated Bank Limited, a wholly owned government of Ghana and licensed by the Bank of Ghana as a universal bank, the government capitalized it with 450 million Ghana cedis. In addition, government had to issue a bond with a face value of 7.6 billion to cover the gap between the deposit liabilities and the remaining good liabilities of the 5 failed banks. This singular action of government has reposed confidence in the banking system because it will ensure that no deposits of the 1.2 million depositors will be lost, and customers will continue to access their deposits without difficulty. Through government's intervention in August this year, deposits of some 11 billion have been saved, as well as some 2,661 jobs, in addition to several hundred saved in 2017. The government's action has also created a strong indigenous Ghanaian bank in place of the 5 failed banks. The government is committed to ensuring that Consolidated Bank Ghana Limited becomes a strong, customer-oriented indigenous bank, well-positioned to meet the demands of all its customers and to serve as a go-to bank for financing small and medium-sized enterprises and corporate Ghana. Mr. Speaker, generally banks have made progress in repairing their balance sheets by writing off bad loans and addressing capital needs. Banks are far advanced in executing their plans to augment their statutory capital in line with the new minimum requirement, compliance of which is expected by end December 2018. The Bank of Ghana is also working on a comprehensive action plan for cleaning up the specialized deposit-taking institutions made up of savings and loan companies, finance houses, rural and community banks, and microfinance institutions. The government will support an orderly resolution of the difficulties and will provide the much needed funds to facilitate prompt payouts to their depositors. Mr. Speaker, the government's financial interventions in the cleanup exercise have been necessary to help mitigate the socioeconomic impacts arising out of the closure of the failed financial institutions. It is important that the cost of these interventions borne by taxpayers are recovered to the extent possible through recoveries from debtors, shareholders, and related connected parties who, through unfair means, siphon funds from the defunct banks to the detriment of depositors, employees, other stakeholders, and the economy as a whole. The Bank of Ghana has also, Mr. Speaker, set up an Office of Ethics and Internal Investigations to investigate all allegations of misconduct by Bank of Ghana staff, including any role in the collapse of the defunct banks. In addition to all these cleanups, government has also taken steps to settle all claims of DKM customers.
All right, so that's what the finance minister had to say about the banking sector last year. But this is a sector of the economy where government touts its ability to have kept things going by intervening. I want your analysis on this, your impartial expert assessment. The fact that 7 banks have collapsed and the government has spent, what, 12 billion on fixing that problem. Is this in any way a success for the government?
Well, I think that the first thing we can attribute it is, I think we had a problem with the regulator that we cannot run away from. If the regulation was up to speed or up to scratch, wouldn't be where we are. There are a number of challenges in the banking sector, and from non-performing loans, which some people said had worked to make them insolvent, others made a number of cases, and there are cases in court. I don't want to prejudge the outcome of the cases in court, and I'll be very careful not to do that. I think by and large, from what government is saying, they found evidence that some of the banks, some of the owners of the banks had actually misapplied depositors' funds. If that is the case, government has all the state machinery at its disposal. Implement the law to its fullest extent. Make sure that those you feel, based on the evidence before you, that they have done some wrong, bring them before the appropriate bodies and get them to face the full rigors of the law. As far as saving depositors' funds are concerned, and again, I don't want to, as it were, second guess what the head or what the governor of the Bank of Ghana would have done. Probably, as we sit here, with the benefit of hindsight, we can give 1,001 alternatives that we could have pursued. Him being the governor at the time, based on the information before him, he took a certain course of action. We have every right to disagree with him if we don't think that that was the best course of action to take. I think the decision as or the conclusion as to whether it's been a success or not, we can't tell in the short term. In the medium to long term, we'll find out whether this particular approach the government took was the right step. Because we've had a number of banks collapse. And remember, we've revoked the licenses of microfinance institutions as well. Last week, it was the fund managers. Now, what is the effect of this on the economy? Remember, all these institutions had workers. These workers were earning income. Today, they are out of jobs. What is its impact on the economy? These are bigger questions we need to ask. And so, in coming out to say whether it succeeded or not, did we only look at it from the perspective of securing depositors' funds? Or we're looking at it of its impact on the workers and others as well? So these are questions that I think that everyone is entitled to make a good opinion on. And I would not preempt what the courts will say as to whether BOG was right or not. It is for a court of law to determine. As to whether the impact on the economy will be good or not, we are yet to see. But from where we stand, if what government is saying is true, and I'm not saying that what they are saying is not true, because you have an alternative fact that has been given up. If what government is saying is true, then yes, probably their course of action is justified. If there's more to the story than we are being told, I think that the case in court will bring it out for us to know. So, from my perspective, government stood in to secure depositors' funds. But did we look at the bigger picture? What has happened to the workers and the people who depend on them? Because last week Friday, people went to work with the hope that they had work. Yeah. And they got to know that you don't have a job anymore. What is the impact on that person, that person's family, and the people who depend on them? So, in looking at securing depositors' funds, I think that we could have gone a step further to find a social safety net for the people who will be affected by these exercises. Right. And I think on that score, we have not done well as a nation.
Okay, let's look at the most recent development in the banking sector, and that's the recent revocation of licenses for the fund management companies. Something occurs to me that there is a very big difference between what has happened there and what happened with the banks. With the banks, government went to find some 12 billion, and they brought that to secure the depositors' funds, because the argument here is that the managers of these banks have taken these monies and used them in a way that makes it impossible for them to make them available to the depositors. So that money had to be found from somewhere, and then government is going to try and get that back from these organizations, either through sale of assets or whatever. So something was done, depositors' money saved. With these fund management companies, again, depositors, innocent people who have followed the law, put their money with organizations that are licensed to, hold their money. Now, these organizations cannot provide the money to these customers, just like some of the banks couldn't. And the bank says, and the government says, okay, or in this case, SEC, the regulator says, okay, we're going to take away the licenses. These companies can no longer operate. But there is no 12 billion coming from somewhere to come and, cushion these people. Rather, what they're saying is, join a queue as a, what's the word, is it creditor?
Administrator,
no, as a, when somebody owes you money, you are a creditor.
The creditor. So the bank becomes the debtor too.
Join the queue as one of many creditors. We're going to liquidate these banks and then hopefully pay you. Banks who could not pay the customers, whatever assets they had or whatever, they could not find money to pay these customers. Now, and there are no banks, there are fund management. Now, you're saying that you're going to liquidate their assets to pay these customers. Definitely, some innocent people are going to end up out of pocket, are they not?
Yes.
Who should they sue?
I think this is a matter of law. And I'm not a lawyer, but my basic understanding is that company is a limited liability.
Yeah.
So companies have the right to own assets. And when you are in default, you can go to court and have their asset attached. And if it's also found out that the actions of the directors had been fraudulent enough and that has resulted in that, then the veil can also be lifted and your personal assets will also be attached. And to the extent that your actions were so criminal too, you can also face a criminal prosecution. I stand to be corrected. Yes. But why, the question is, why didn't government also build the asset management? I think, I don't intend to speak for the government, but from the policy side also, you want to make people be more responsible in the work that they do. If government seems to bail everybody, if I go to China and I lose my money, I'm also a limited liability. I pay taxes, so I also expect government to bail me. So that government cannot be bailing everybody. We don't have the money. Look at the 12 billion Ghana cedis that we've used to bail the banks, which we don't even have the money there. We need to raise some bonds to do that. And so government shouldn't bail them. Let the system deal and retrieve the assets, and if there's something left over, then government can decide, okay, look, we can give you some token. And let us also know that now we have the Deposit Insurance Commission also there. That also ensures, for example, if you go and borrow, if you have your money with the banks and the bank collapses, you are insured up to 6,000 cedis or so.
Can you imagine?
Yes, I mean, in every country there's a limit. In the US, I think it's $150,000 or so. We can't.
My producer, Derek Echo Sam, very rich guy. If his bank collapses today, only 6,000 of his hundreds of thousands of cedis will be saved.
Well, that is
How
why,
is that insurance?
That is why you have to spread your risks by, spreading your portfolio across multiple institutions as one. But of course, the state cannot insure 100% of your money in case the bank collapse. It's not done anywhere, not even the Bank of England or the US FDIC. So that is something that...
But the limits are more realistic, are they not? And there's private involvement in the provision of insurance.
Yes,
it's
here,
not the state
and
doing
here
it.
also, I think the figure was also arrived at based upon the data. The data says that the average savings we have in the banks are around, I think it hovers around that figure, about 80% of the money, and these are the majority. The outliers who are having millions of CDs, 300 million CDs in their account, you cannot make the law. You can't make the law for them. You look to have the central masses, and if they get 6,000, 7,000, that should be enough.
Okay.
I think by and large, what we need to talk about as a people going forward is how do we instill the confidence in the ordinary Ghanaian about the banking sector, because for the fund managers, these are fund managers who are registered and who are licensed by SEC. So we woke up one morning to realize that their licenses have been revoked because they cannot meet depositors' obligations by demanding for their deposits. And these are critical things we need to look at as a people. What I think we should have as a conversation as a people is, do we have adequate laws? Are our institutions empowered enough to be able to ensure that these fund managers, these banks, these deposit-taking institutions are doing what is right? Because if they are, then we shouldn't be seeing these things happening. So the bigger conversation for me that we should have as a nation is that, how do we move forward from here? What steps should we take? We passed the Specialized Deposit-Taking Institutions and Banks Act because we felt that we needed to give the regulator more power to deal with the problems, the systemic problems in the banking sector. What went wrong? In the light of all the licenses that have been revoked, what is the assurance that the entire system is working as well as it should? So we need to have that conversation as a people, devoid of politics, devoid of everything. Let's look at the economic realities and come to a conclusion that this and that is what we have to do. I think that the US, when they had their crisis, learned from it and passed a number of laws and decided that going forward, that is what we need to do. This is our crisis as a nation. It may not be as huge as the financial meltdown in the US, but we need to have that conversation and take very bold steps going forward, so that I can have the confidence that, William, if I deposit 1,000 Ghana cedis in my account, it is safe. The directors of the banks or the owners will not misapply the funds, and that when I need my money, I will get my money. That is all there is in banking. If you don't have that confidence, people will not willingly go. And remember that our lending rates are high because the cost of the funds to the banks are high. All the financial institutions do is what we call financial intermediation. They pick from those who have surplus and give it to those who need. So if you don't have the confidence that I'll go and put my money there and then it can be cheap funds for the bank for them to turn in our assets as a loan, then obviously we'll always have that high interest rates that we have in the country. So these are things we need to look at as a
Right. Is it worth mentioning the fact that the Americans did bail out the banks during the crisis? They didn't shut them down, even though these banks had messed up majorly. They didn't shut them down. They bailed them out, allowed the system to survive, and few years later, things came back to normal. Should we have considered that option?
I mean, Lehman Brothers was allowed to go under the drain.
Yes.
Bank of America was given bailout. General Motors, all these companies. I think there was a cost-benefit analysis. If government had allowed those institutions to go down, that would have gone down with the economy, the health of the economy. And I'm sure the Bank of Ghana, in taking those decisions, would also look at the implications. And also, we've also have to set the rod of discipline and let banks know that if you do the wrong thing, your license can be revoked from you. This is the first time a regulator is revoking license. And I think we need to live in a country where there's rule of law, that you play by the, because if you look at how some of the banks were reporting their capital adequacy ratio, doing all the bad things, and you expect the government to give you money. No, I don't think it works anywhere. Even by now, some people should even be in jail if what Bank of Ghana alleges are true.
I was going to say, I mean, some of the wrong things that happened were that they were collecting liquidity support from Bank of Ghana when they weren't, first of all, weren't qualified or eligible for liquidity support in those circumstances. And then some of the money that they were getting as liquidity support somehow got paid back to certain officials of the Bank of Ghana. Does it surprise you that no worker, present or past, of the Bank of Ghana has been prosecuted yet since the first bank lost its license, what, 2 years ago?
I mean, it has not only surprised me, I'm even devastated that no one has been put before the court. And I don't know whether they are still waiting to gather evidence to do that.
2 years, then they will never gather.
Yes. And I think we live in a country also whereby we are very slow in touching the untouchables. What these people have done, they have caused a lot of mess. They have caused banks to, directors of banks innocently lose their investment. And now they walk around, they have pocketed money, and nobody is chasing them for any criminal prosecution. That is very, very wrong for our criminal justice system, because if you can do some of these things and still go by and walk around with halo of dignity, go to church or the mosque and sit at the first row and then praise him, and then ride the finest of the car in the city, and you chest out and nothing is happening to you, then we are building a society that doesn't, that has no future for, that cannot guarantee the future for those who want to do the right.
It's tragic. So, I mean, with the amount of money that the government of Ghana has spent on bailing, well, not bailing out, but on solving the banking crisis, there's been some debate. The minority, just this week, Caselato Forsen was talking about how the government refused to record the bailout money as one of the outgoings. They refused to record it as such, but whatever they have recovered through the receiver and so forth, they want to record that as revenue, and that kind of makes it unfair. Ato Forsen was making some point there. I'm failing to get the correct technical term there, but is there some question about the recording of that 12 billion on our books as a nation?
Well, I can speak to what
I'll get the details.
What Ato Forsen said, because I don't have the benefit of it, so I don't want to speculate. But I think that as what we know and what I have seen from official communication is that the amount that has been spent, government had to issue bonds. It simply meant that in terms of actual cash, we didn't have the actual cash to actually go and do that which we did as a bailout. We had to issue bonds to be able to do that. How we account for it in our books, obviously, is a public debt. And then in the final analysis, we expect that will be added to the debt that we have. And so I think even in the media review of the budget, an amount was stated by the Minister of Finance that that's the amount that has been spent, and it pushes up our expenditure line. So I'm yet to see the official communication on that and how that is being accounted for. So I can't really speak to that. But my understanding is that so long as government issues a bond, it becomes part of the public debt of government, and then we have to be able to account for that appropriately. But that is a serious impairment on our books, because over 12 billion, I told you the interest we are paying on our debt is about 18.6 billion. If we are raising 12 billion to just clean up a sector within the economy, the financial sector within the economy, then we have challenges, because the Sino-Hydro deal, which is supposed to solve most of our road infrastructure problems, is $2 billion, which translates to little less than the amount we are spending to clean up the
Absolutely.
financial sector.
Absolutely.
So if we had that opportunity or that borrowing space, we didn't even need to go for the Sino-Hydro deal. We could have raised bonds and then done that.
Exactly.
So you see what the economy is losing
And left Atiwa Forest
as a result of that. So we need, that's why I said we need to interrogate this issue very well. How did we get here as a people? What do we do going forward so that this doesn't recur? Because it is something that has gone on, and it was systemic. It has gone on over a period of time. What did the regulator do? We knew that it got to unsustainable levels. That's why we had to get to this crescendo.
Right.
But before we got here, what steps did we take? Apart from giving them the liquidity support, what steps did we take to ensure that the sector is doing the right thing? And that is the conversation I believe we should be having as a nation. And be very bold, as he said. There can't be untouchables in any part of the world. You have to let everybody who is done wrong face the full rigors of the law. And I think that when we do that, we'll have a future as a nation.
There is one thing that perhaps more Ghanaians are talking about than anything else. One aspect of the budget that more Ghanaians are talking about than anything else: roads. Shall we touch on roads?
Yes.
All right then. So first, let's have a look at what was said in the last budget. I believe we have some graphics about the state of roads and the plans of government. Every year, inexhaustible lists of roads being constructed across the nation. How many of us hear the words "Fufusu Sola" in our sleep? Well, we're going to hear that list again, and I'll bet you Fufusu Sola will be on it. So here's the reality of Ghana. We spend so much money on roads, yet we have such a poor road network. How did roads become this bottomless pit into which we are either pretending to throw money or we are throwing actual money and getting no results? Who wants to start?
Let me start this. I think I'd like to start by saying that in this country, we pretend to be constructing roads, and we construct roads. It's here today and it's gone tomorrow. I remember in 2014, I was driving on one of the road at Lekmak area. Mm-hmm. Within a week, I saw them constructing the road with the bitumen. Within a week, the road has been washed away by the torrential rainstorm. Oh. And you ask yourself, why would you, I mean, if you are a road contractor and you want to construct road, I think you also get data from where the Ghana Meteorological mm-hmm. asking ourselves that if we had invested well in good construction like Nkrumah did in the 60s, by now majority of the roads that I would prefer to have 40% of roads in this country constructed this year and they lasting for many years than 80% and they lasting for 10 years. But because of the tyranny of the electoral cycle we have in our country, the president is going to re-election, and so he wants to make sure that he spread himself thinly on all roads, and so the quality is also toned down, and that is a problem. Yeah. And as a country, we need to sit down and map all the roads that we have in this country. How much is it going to cost us to solve it? How do we solve it? Let's look at the financial engineering. In the US, after the World War II, General Eisenhower, coming back from Europe, said that if America is attacked by Soviet Union, it will take US longer time to get to the other side. And so they decided to solve their interstate highway system once and for all, and they did that. Ghana, we are not solving our roads problem at all. We construct the N1 and then we leave the traffic at the other end. It's like a zero-sum game, roads that we are constructing. I think that piecemeal approach is not helping Ghana, and I think we need engineers in this space because, and I always want to say that most of the problems we have in this country are engineering. Traffic congestion engineering, flooding is engineering, sanitation is engineering, healthcare issues engineering, but engineers do not even have say when all these things are being done. Yeah. So we need to have a broader conversation on solving our road engineering problem once and for all, so that we know that we've used, let's say, $10 billion to solve our roads. The next thing is what? We move from road to another sector. So within a space of, let's say, 50 years, you know that you've been able to solve all your hardcore infrastructure needs.
Wow, well, you make it sound so simple. Makes you wonder why we're doing anything but that. You know, but let's think about the quality issue. I think that's what Appiah has raised, which I think is of serious importance. Let's talk about the economics of spending money on poor quality roads. The former president, John Mahama, when he went to inaugurate, and we always inaugurate our roads, went to inaugurate a road in the Volta region, the Dodi Pepeso Road. This is the road that had been constructed by the Burkinabe contractor, Kanazoe, the one who gave him the Ford gift.
Alleged.
Oh, he did give him a gift. It was alleged to be a bribe, but accepted as a gift. So at the inauguration of this road, the president's words were that this was the best constructed road he had ever seen in Ghana. Within 3 months, it was riddled with potholes. So, is it that we don't know what good quality is? What is the impact, the implication of spending a fortune on building roads, sometimes building them overnight in the run-up to an election, only for them to deteriorate in weeks?
I think the impact, as we all know, is that every year we seem to be allocating money to fix the poor roads that we constructed.
Same ones.
And so year on year, we are spending huge sums of money, but we are not seeing the needed impact. So if we improve the quality and it can last for, and I hear road that is made from asphalt usually lasts for about 10 years. If it's concretized, it can go 15, years. 20 years, or even more, 50 years. But the quality of the road is always an issue. I don't know whether it's an engineering problem or it's a financing problem, because it could be either of them or both. If it's an engineering problem, I doubt it's an engineering problem. I don't think the road engineers we have in Ghana are of that poor quality. I doubt that. I don't want to believe that.
Well, 3 months,
I don't want to believe that.
3 months, potholes.
I don't want to believe that. As a professional, I wouldn't doubt the professional competencies of the road engineers in Ghana.
Your shock absorbers would doubt them.
Well, I'm saying their professional competence, I wouldn't doubt. So I am thinking it is more of a financial problem. So there's a right mix you have to get to be able to do the road. Now, if the bitumen is not of the certain quality that you need or the certain quantity that you need, then obviously you will not get the road lasting for that long as it ought to. If you don't do the surfacing right, obviously, and all that is money. And remember, most of the people who are crying now that they have not been paid are road contractors. Let's look at it from that perspective. And I always think that it has a financial bent to it. So this person goes to a bank, takes a facility, constructs the road. It may take 3-4 years. No, interim payment certificates are issued. The road has been constructed. It may take 3-4 years for the person to get payment from government. And when the person gets it, remember, interest is already accruing on the facility the person went to take.
Yeah.
So if you want the economics to make sense, what will simply happen is that you have to do it at a certain quality that even if you get your money in 3-4 years, you can still be able to pay off the loan you took, pay off the cost of constructing the road, and not be in a deficit. So we need to look at that, how we even fund our roads. If we take 3 to 4 years to pay our road contractors, and people have been crying since this government came into office that they have not been paid. It's a reality. And the argument was that let us take an audit of it and make sure you actually deserve to be paid. Auditor General has done the audit. He has confirmed the position. Government says we started paying road contractors. We paid a huge chunk of them. But look at the time lag. And the interest on these amounts were dragging. So the way we finance our roads in Ghana, I think, is the major problem. And again, I wouldn't doubt the competencies of our engineers. I wouldn't do that. I know people who are road engineers who work with highways, who have gone to the top schools as we know it. Some of the schools some of us have attended, and even better schools, and who are in Ghana, who are working. So I wouldn't doubt their competence. On any day, I think it's the financing arrangement that goes into it. And so the mindset is that let us construct it at a cost such that we'll be able to make a return. And remember, we cannot also take out corruption as a factor. Because if everybody who is within the chain, who matters, who gives out the contract, who certifies that the road has been completed, and who recommends that payment be made, if everybody along that was doing their job rightly, without any form of influence, without the political hands coming into play, I do not think that we'll have that situation. So we need to address it as a holistic issue. We cannot construct with the, I was telling people that, I remember sometime in 2016, I went for a funeral, and on the Volta Region Road, I mean, it's part of the Eastern Corridor. At the time, they were constructing a certain portion. Whilst I was returning from the journey, the road was being constructed, but there were potholes in the road. So I saw the road contractor fixing the potholes, and the road that had not even been commissioned for people to use.
Yes.
And I said, this road will not last. Today, the road is not there. It's not there anymore. I mean, it's just potholes with the old road. And these are the realities we face. So let us as a nation come to that realization that the way we finance our roads and the corruption-laden situation within it is part of the problem. And if we don't solve that, as he said, the interstate is beautiful. And the one thing you look about developed countries is that every single time you see them make a conscious effort to maintain the road.
Yeah.
A very conscious effort to maintain it. So state and local agencies, that's all they do. Making sure the road quality is good enough so that you don't have problems. I traveled to Kumasi 2 weeks ago for a funeral on Saturday. I was returning. I got to Amasaman Pokwase. After paying the toll, I fell into a pothole and destroyed the tire. So I paid the toll to destroy my tire.
Imagine
that is it. And the motorway is the same way. Every day I drive on the Akatima motorway, I pray to God, because I don't know what will happen to me on that road. And I don't think I'm a terrible driver, but you have potholes on the road, and sometimes you don't even know where another one has developed. So if you are driving in the night and it's pitch dark, you have to be careful. You have to pray, because you don't know where you encounter another pothole that may take you off the road. So as a people, we need to be serious about this. We cannot be constructing roads every 3 months or every year we are doing patching on roads. It is unacceptable by any stretch of imagination.
And something just crossed my mind. Maybe you guys as insiders can educate us, because I don't know the answer. Must have been about 4 months ago, the president went up to Tamale and launched the beginning of construction for a number of roads across the country to be funded by the first $500 million tranche of Sino Hydro money. We all remember this event, right?
Including the interchange.
But just yesterday, the vice president thanked the vice premier of China for now giving us the first tranche of 500 million. But we were told back then that we've received the first tranche. How many first tranches do we have? What has happened there? What exactly is going on? Does anybody know?
What I hear is that what really happens with China and the way they do their things, Sinosure has to actually certify before the funds are actually released, and it appears dealing with China is a whole tall order. So we may have to be careful. I mean, the CBD loan, we pay so much in fees and never got
the money.
Yes, so we have to be careful when we deal with the Chinese as far as their processes are concerned. I think we don't know the entire process, and that is why it appears that the information that we are getting appears to be contradictory. Where we know the funds have been released, is it that they've been secured, or they've been approved, or they've been released? So we need to know that. Is it approval? Is it that it's been released? Is it that we have it available for us to use? Or there are condition precedents that have not been met.
I actually spoke to a government insider back then when the president launched the thing in Tamale. And he said to me, we've got the money.
We have the money.
That's what he said. And then yesterday,
I think
the vice president again said,
I think evidence shows that we didn't have it.
Clearly.
Clearly we didn't have it. And now we are being told that we have it. So we just hope and pray that we actually have it. Because yes, I mean, if past events are anything to happen, we must be careful when we deal, when we have such assurances from our development partner, China. So we just hope and pray we do have it. Because my major concern is that we have to fix our roads. For me, I don't see how we go around it. Some of the roads in our country, and you look at the Accra-Kumasi road, since the time of President Kufuor, we've been constructing this road, and we have never completed it. I wonder why.
And we will never complete until the second coming.
Oh.
That is the problem we have in this country. Instead of saying that, look, we are using 5 years to construct Kumasi-Accra road, that is going to last for the next 30 years. So that we know that we've solved that road forever, at least for the next quarter of a century. We don't do that. We do a piecemeal approach. We do part dual carriage, part single lane, and we are killing people. Our accidents, our roads have become our graveyard. And in Ghana, whenever you are traveling, you have to go on your knee and pray because you don't know whether you come back home. Elsewhere, whenever you are traveling on the road, I mean, it's normal thing. You don't even pray to God to grant you traveling mercy.
You take it for granted, so the quality of the service.
Yes, so here we burden God with needless prayer because we are refusing to do what is right in our country. In fact, road is very key to our structural economic transformation. And the way we are doing our roads, I think that we cannot compete with the likes of South Africa. And you know, sometimes in Ghana, I think the way we compare ourselves, that kind of mediocre comparison is something that scandalizes me. Because one, even political parties, MPP say, oh, we did better than this party. But look, the previous government performance was bad, so Ghanaians revoke their mandates from him. And now when you've come and you want to compare yourself with a government whose mandate was revoked and given to you, I mean, it doesn't make sense. It doesn't line up. You get it. And so we need to look into best practice, like best standard, like countries like South Africa to Singapore, Malaysia, South Korea, and try to see whether we can close that gap. Not comparing yourself with Nigeria or Togo or the previous regime. Now, back on the roads again, I think that we need to be very careful. We need to be very serious on our road infrastructure in this country. Because if you look at even Accra, the cost of traffic congestion in Accra is so huge that government has not even commissioned any study to do it. And we live in a country whereby government does not commission a study. Every study that we hear of are studies funded by what? Foreign government or academia. And so
government will come and dispute the findings.
Yes.
They do no studies.
They do no study.
Everybody's study.
Yes. And government pretends it knows better than anybody in this country. So let's go straight to implementation. That is why most of the government intervention is failing. Look at free SHS. It's a brilliant policy, but I think that before we started, government could have done forecasting, a lot of work supposed to have taking place before rolling it out, so that we don't just wake up overnight to hear of a double track.
Maybe that's our segue into education. Let's spend a little bit of time on that. And this year, we've had, for basic education, we've had a new curriculum introduced. We're halfway through the term, and we still don't have textbooks. So the education minister now says that textbooks are not essential to teaching. I don't know. But you also had an example of double track having to exist because somebody didn't take out a calculator and do some small projection. We also have the example of our tertiary institutions, which we have turned all these polytechnics into technical universities, and they are still teaching grammar programs, humanities. And nobody is doing anything to ensure that the SHS graduates who actually fill these technical universities and go and study technical programs. Nobody is doing anything about that. So I am seeing a certain lack of planning in our education sector. Am I being paranoid? Or, I mean, is government, does government actually have a master plan that I'm just not smart enough to see?
I think the problem, again, it comes down to politicization. We have politicized every aspect of our national life. If we had had a conversation as a nation that this is what we want to do in the educational sector and we have agreed on it, when you come into power, your job is to implement it in the phase that it's gotten to. But you realize that in our country, every government appears to have its perspective of how the education system should be. And that is why we don't seem to be making progress. When we started the senior high school concept, the concept of the senior high school, when we changed it from senior secondary school, was to make it a 4-year program. That was the concept. There was a change in government. The idea was that, oh, the 4 years is too laborious, so let's change it to 3 years. We reverted back. Thank God we're not going back to 4 years. But we would have had the cycle with the change in government. Now, the question was that I was part of a broader reform. What was senior high school supposed to achieve? The idea of changing polytechnics to technical universities, what was it supposed to achieve? What was the long-term plan? Did we get everybody on board? As far as our universities, traditional universities are concerned, you heard about Legon crisis with accommodation and all that. We have not had a comprehensive look at things as a people. I think as a nation, we need to do a lot of introspection. We do not plan for the future. It's sad to say it, but it is a fact. Kojo, it is a fact. We do not think long term. We are only thinking for the next 4 years, next 8 years. We do not think in the next 20 years, what are we going to do? Government, the MPP government has its own policy on education, but we have a buy-in from the NDC government, such that if they are to lose power, they will still continue down that particular trajectory. Do we do that? So these are some of the challenges we have. We change the curriculum, the textbooks are not available. This is not the first time. Could you trust me? It won't be the last time. What are we doing to solve the problems? It appears as we go ahead, we come back to the same issues again. And it's an issue of planning. In the next 20 years, what does Ghana want to do with this education system? How many tertiary institutions are we looking at having? How should the technical universities be functioning? How should our senior secondary schools be functioning? These are all questions we need to have a broader education and national consensus on, so that when you are elected into government, your job is to implement it to a certain portion. I was talking to Apia during the break that when we were young, we used to talk about Vision 2020 as if it was light years away. It's less than 2 months. It's less than 2 months away.
Yes.
If you take out November, it's only December. We are in 2020. Vision 2020, it was touted as the best idea ever. When President Kufuor came, it was even Vision 2015 when they said that they were going to accelerate the development. As a nation, what have we achieved? So we need to have that conversation. And again, I appeal to all persons. This is not a matter of politics. Put the politics aside. As a nation, what do we want to achieve? Because sometimes you look at the way we train people in this country and you wonder why Ghana, you shouldn't wonder why Ghana is where it is. We are not training the mind to be able to solve problems. It has always been internalize and reproduce. But we must move away from that, because if we don't, we can never solve our problems as we have it. So my solution, we need to have a national conversation on education. We must agree on what we want to do. And when any government comes into power, yours is to do your bit to achieve that broader vision.
So, Apia, in 2019, we spent 1.7 billion on free SHS. not on education as a sector, on free SHS alone. All of that money was oil money, essentially. Is this sustainable? As a country, have we even earned 5 billion from oil yet? And we're spending 1.7 billion of it on free SHS alone in 1 year. So in 2025, what will we use to pay for free SHS?
I think first, free SHS has come to stay. We can't go back. The question is, how do we ensure that there's financial sustainability? And as I kept saying, we have the money in this country, just that the Minister of Finance and his Ghana Revenue Authority, they are not going for it. If you look at our tax to GDP, that is the point that I'm coming from. The tax to GDP ratios indicates that over 20 billion Ghana cedis of tax revenue is not being collected. If we collect it and spend almost 2 billion on free SHS in terms of even the recurrent expenditure on it, and additional 5 billion on infrastructure and further expansion
wearing punk, cholo,
we'll still be able to stand on our feet. And so we can make free SHS work for us as a country. But the one thing that we need to do as a country is that we need to have a long-term planning, because the free SHS is increasing the enrollment. And when they finish next 2 years or so, the first batch are going to the university.
Cholo trouser.
Well, the university going to run
double track.
And should everybody go to do the grammar course? And this is the question that we need to start finding answers to. We shouldn't wait till we get there in 2022 and then we call for stakeholder engagement at the conference center. and
then people will complain they were not
DJ
invited.
Rampage, DJ put.
All right, now William. So okay, we've spent 1.7 billion on education, but what has been the outcome? What have we achieved?
Mixtape of the year.
Yes, enrollment is up, so more people now have access to education, and that was always an aim. I mean, one of the main aims of free SHS. So that is working. Do we have quality education? Do we have better quality education now that we are spending a fortune on it?
I think that we have to address the two issues side by side. And when you listen to the Deputy Minister of Education, he's always said that he doesn't believe in improving one before the other. That you have to be able to achieve both in terms of quality and access at the same time. The quality comes from the nature of the curriculum and the facilities that we have in place to be able to train people. And so if we are pumping money into paying fees, what are we doing as far as the infrastructure is concerned? What are we doing as far as the curriculum is concerned? How is that helping us achieve the next decade what we need to be able to train our minds to do? Because I think what we went through, what most of us went through, and all of us did go through, was more of a system of try and internalize and reproduce.
Yeah.
The world has moved far away from that, where now it's a problem-solving system. And so the next thing we need to be able to address as far as free high school, free senior high school is concerned, is also looking at one, the curriculum, and two, the infrastructure that we have to be able to support it. And so it's not just a matter of paying the fees that we are accustomed to pay and other things that they need, but improving the infrastructure. And I know that a number of things, I think GMPC and other institutions and even Get Fund is being securitized to be able to get to put up infrastructure. The infrastructure is one step. The curriculum, even the quality of the teachers who will be training them. And I know government has started the licensure system for teachers and all that. They had to recruit more people to deal with the tracking system. How do we solve all these problems? So it's a mixed bag. So we want to see clear policies along those lines, that if we are improving access, then we are improving quality by improving the infrastructure. We are improving quality by also training the teachers well. We're improving quality by also changing the curriculum to make it responsive to the needs of society. It has to be a holistic approach. And that is what I want government, not just government, I want the political leaders and actors and the people who matter, the intellectual brains around the table, to sit down and come to a conclusion. Because as we've heard from NDC, free SHS is a priority for them as well. So this policy ain't going away. What we need to do,
re-examine it or review
in
it
terms of, I think in terms of the funding, and two, the tracking.
Track.
I think that is what the debate has been about. But we need to be able to have a national conversation on how we improve quality that goes with the access and quantity we are producing. That is what we need to do as a nation, devoid of politics. Because when the politics comes in, we lose sight of the bigger picture.
Apia, your thoughts on quantity versus quality?
Yes, I think we can.
So we're waiting for
attain them. They are mutually inclusive, but as of now, I think it's pretending to seem that we are more concerned about the numbers of enrollment more than the quality.
Yeah,
maybe the quantity may precede the quality in the short term, but after the system has reached its cruising altitude, we may be able to get to the quality that because most of the things that happen
JoyNews
are experimental.
Yeah.
And so we need, of these teething problems, if we give ourselves, let's say, government, I don't know, I don't intend to speak for the government, but if you look at what Get Fund is doing and all the infrastructure what that's going on, in the next 2 or 3 years, they would have been able to finish all the projects that will get rid of the double track system. And then, based upon that, students will have more time to stay on campus. So the first 3 years will be like the experimental guinea pigs. That's sometime, if you're not lucky, like when SSC came, the first 3 batches were used for that research work. And so these first 3 batches are also going to go through this experimental trial. So that is the problem. But I think that free SHS is one of the the best interventions that we've ever had in this country, and I think we need to support government to ensure that it succeeds.
It works. Okay, all right. Now, in a short while, we'll be connecting with Roland in Parliament. He's been speaking to a few people, including Joe Jackson from Dalex Finance. But before we go to him, that while we're on education, I mean, tertiary education. This government hasn't quite put its mind to it. We've seen the attempt to pass a bill to sort of unify all of the charters or whatever it is that establishes these universities. Nobody quite understands what problem that is aiming to solve. But that is it. That's the only thing we've seen government pay attention to when it comes to tertiary education. The fact that we're about to see an influx of students, a huge increase in influx of students who qualify for university in the next year's intake. That fact, we haven't heard any planning on it. We haven't heard any planning on how to ensure that these universities that are equipped to offer technical programs do so